watching Goal Line Extended presented by Lacrosse Flash.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Goal Line Extended on the Lacrosse Flash Podcast Network. Today is Friday, May 21st, and I'm your host, Ryan Holzbus. Glad that you could join us as we get set to look ahead to this weekend's quarterfinal round of the NCAA tournament, as just 8 teams remain, and they will battle for a spot in next week's Final Four. And joining me in that conversation will be Jordan Johnson, Flash writer and analyst, as he's standing by and will join us in a few moments. And then as we continue our Flash team previews ahead of the 2021 season, we will also continue our GLE team preview features, as today we will be talking about the Redwoods Lacrosse Club, a team that has gotten so close the past 2 seasons, losing in overtime playoff games in back-to-back campaigns to end their season. We'll see if they can get over that hump this summer and then into September. And joining us first will be Redwoods midfielder Myles Jones, and then Owens will stop by to wrap things up as we take a closer look at the Redwoods and try to figure out who makes their final 25-man roster and who should be competing for and getting game roster spots. And then the accompanying article will be available on lacrosseflash.com, as well as our other team previews, being that this is the 4th one, so make sure to check that out. And we will also continue those into next week and then into the week before the start of the season. Also, live right now on the Lacrosse Flash YouTube channel is a special GLE interview with Redwoods head coach Nat St. Laurent, as we talked about his team in last year's tournament, some of the additions he made this offseason, and then how he expects his team to look here in year 3 of the PLL. Make sure to check that out if you get a chance. Again, available on the Lacrosse Flash YouTube channel. As I welcome in Jordan Johnson to today's show. Jordan, what's going on, my man?
Nothing much, man. Happy to be back. Happy for another set of college games. Let's do it. Tournament's getting fun. Let's get into it, buddy.
Tournament is getting real fun. Yeah, let's get right into this. Glad to have you joining me, as always, as we get set to look ahead to this awesome quarterfinal slate for this weekend's NCAA tournament. That is where we begin today's show, as this weekend we'll have a total of 4 games broken up into Saturday and Sunday, 1 game at noon Eastern and the second at 2:30 each day. And by late Sunday afternoon, we will know the 4 teams that will square off next weekend in the Final Four. So a ton on the line here this weekend for each of these 8 teams, as a few of them look for what seems like routine Final Four appearances, others looking to make their first appearances either ever or in a real long time. So we'll wait and see how the weekend unfolds. Let's start with the first game of the weekend, though, as Virginia will square off with Georgetown, the Big East champion, who took care of business last Saturday night against Syracuse, a team that beat Virginia twice in the regular season. These 2 teams looking like they will match up very nicely, and we should be set for an awesome game. But when it comes down to it, Virginia and all of its talent, the defending champions, looking to do just that, defend their championship, and then Georgetown and its quick emergence as one of the top programs in the country with one of the best players in the country in Jake Caraway, trying to play spoiler and move on here to the Final Four. What storylines are you watching for in this game, and for both teams respectively? What gives them the edge in this matchup?
So where I'm really interested to watch is Georgetown's zone defense. They played it very well against Syracuse and their shooters last weekend. Virginia, kind of the same thing. They have a lot of guys that can flat out shoot the ball, a lot of guys that can flat out pass. So I'm really interested to see if they continue that zone or if they go man-to-man, because if they go man-to-man, that might play in Virginia's favor here. For Georgetown on offense, I mean, Jake Caraway, he's a stud. He's a two-time finalist. I'm probably higher on him than most. I called that he was going to have a big game against Syracuse, and which he did. And then they got help from their other guys like Dylan Hess, who is a freshman emerging, and he's going to be one of the best players in college lacrosse here coming up, I think, that people are sleeping on. So I'm really interested to mainly see that Georgetown defense going up against that Virginia offense, especially that Virginia offense that frankly looked sluggish coming out against Bryant after having 3 weeks off. And then I'm interested to see how PD LaSalle does at the face-off X, because I think the key to Virginia winning is they're going to have to get more possessions than Georgetown, and that starts with PD at face-off.
That has seemed like the recipe for success there for Virginia all season, starting with Petey LaSalle at the face-off X. We'll see if he can get back to his winning ways that he saw kind of throughout this season. Virginia and Georgetown, though, opening face-off set for noon Eastern on ESPNU. Look to see how Virginia operates there in the transition game. Kind of Georgetown can keep this to 6-on-6. Georgetown, that's kind of the key for them. Keep this to a 6-on-6 game. Try to avoid the transition defensive opportunities. Let's move on to the second game on Saturday as the top-seeded Tar Heels of North Carolina will take on the Rutgers Scarlet Knights at 2:30 Eastern on ESPNU. Rutgers backed by all their Big Ten haters coming off their first tournament win since 1990, while UNC is trying to get back to the Final Four weekend. They're co-ACC champs this season. In regards to that matchup, what are you most looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to seeing how Colin Kurse does. I mean, he was a brick wall last week against Lehigh. He's going to have a better game, even better than the one against Lehigh. You talk about UNC shooter Chris Gray, Nikki Solomon, Justin Anderson, even Will Commodore Perry. UNC is going to come out shooting the ball early. They had just about as perfect of a game as you could have had against Monmouth here, kind of in a quote-unquote warm-up here against Rutgers. And then from Rutgers, on the Rutgers side of things, I'm interested to see how they do at the face-off X against Tucci. They struggled against Mike Sisselberger, who is the best in the country. But Tucci is right there. I would put him in that top three with Sisselberger, Jake Nazo. You want to throw in a couple other guys, whatever. But I'm interested to see, because if Rutgers loses another game loses that face-off game, I mean, I'm sorry. The difference between Lehigh and UNC's offenses are just dramatic. UNC has one of the best offenses, if not the best in the country. You can't lose too many face-offs there. And Rutgers defensively, I really love them defensively. They struggled, but the way they played against Lehigh, I mean, look, you got a guy like Jared Jean Felix, who is one of the most underrated defenders in the country, I think. They're gonna have to win the one-on-one matchups. That's going to be the key for them. But I'm very interested to see how this game goes, because if it's more free flowing, that could play in UNC's favor. If it's more of a slower game, Rutgers really is going to beat you in the second and third quarters. That could play to their advantage.
Kind of thinking the same thing I said there about the Georgetown-Virginia matchup. Kind of the fast-paced tempo style of the game will definitely benefit there. Virginia and UNC kind of playing a slower game, more 6-on-6, probably more to benefit Georgetown and Rutgers. So we will see how the pace of play goes in these two games, how it affects these two teams, or these four teams, I should say, two teams in these two matchups. But the Tar Heels and Scarlet Knights coming off two of the more lopsided contests in the first round. We're expecting a much tighter game in this one, which leads us into Sunday's game, which with the day getting started at noon Eastern with Duke and Loyola, a rematch that we've seen many times here before in the NCAA tournament, as Duke has done what we expected of them during this season. We expected to see them in this game playing for a spot in the Final Four. Loyola, on the other hand, didn't have the same expectations, at least I'd say from the media, but they have had an up and down season. It seems like they figured it out, though, here over the past month or so, and they are just as dangerous as ever after receiving an at-large bid over their rival in the Patriot League Army, and then they beat Denver last weekend in Denver. So this matchup early Sunday afternoon, a game we've seen a few times over the years. How does Duke get it done, and then how does Loyola pull the upset here?
How does Duke get it done? They have to make their shots. At the end of the day, you're going against another brick wall. These goalie play in the tournament so far has just been absolutely sensational. You're going against Sam Schaefer, who had the game and the save of his life last week. I would expect this game to be more defensive than people think it is. But at the same time, in order for Duke to win this game, they're going to have to win the majority of possessions. And that's what, I mean, I know I harp on it a lot, but it comes down to this face-off X. The matchup between Nazo and Savio, two of the best that we have in our game right now, that's Jake Nazo is going to have to win at least 50% in order for them to win this game. Loyola has proved, and even against Denver, that when they lose the majority of the face-offs, they can still win. They're going to beat you in between the lines. They're going to get you defensively. They're going to do a better, in my opinion, they're going to do a better job clearing most likely than Duke is. So it's just about the little things. They're going to get to the ground balls more, but Duke is going to shoot the lights out of you at the end of the day. Duke has JT Giles Harris on defense. they might win your initial one-on-one matchups, but if you get a team like Duke deep into the shot clock, that opens up things for Loyola. And if they can kind of play keep away ball here on the Duke side, then that might play for them. And Loyola, frankly, is just going to have to make the most of their opportunities because they could be in for something that's a lot like what they were in for when they faced TD Erland and Alex Stavnikis last week, where those possessions may not come as frequently as Charlie Toomey would like. But at the same time, I think Mark Van Arsdale, their offensive coordinator, is going to have a great plan against his Duke defense. But I'm really just interested to see how Loyola defensively can stop those shooters from Duke.
Absolutely something that we will be watching and looking at this game, obviously under a lens. Duke and Loyola meeting at noon Eastern on Sunday afternoon. And then you brought up a goalie play there, obviously goalie play in the first round. Very, very impressive. Some stats here. Colin Krieg, 88% was his save percentage in that first round. Colin Kirst at 77% for Notre Dame. Liam Entenmann at 68% for UVA. Alex Rode was 62%. And then just the other two names, Mike Adler for Duke was at 58%. McElroy for Georgetown, 56%. And then on this list that I'm looking at here, Shaney's name isn't even on it. Or not Shaney, Schaefer, I mean, excuse me there. Sam Schaefer's name not even on that list there for Loyola, making that big save against Denver at the end of the game. So obviously goalie play, very, very good here through the first round. We'll see if it continues here into the quarterfinals. But then moving on here, following that Duke and Loyola game on ESPNU, Maryland will travel to Notre Dame to take on the Irish, looking like it will be the best game of the weekend. What are you looking forward to watching in this one?
Maryland, it's their first biggest competition of the year. I'm interested to see their offense outside of Jared Bernhardt because let's be real, we know he's going to put up his numbers, but I feel like Kevin Corrigan and Notre Dame, they're going to have a great plan for Jared Bernhardt, just like Hopkins did for a half. And I'm interested to see what they do outside of him. I love Logan Wisnauskas, Anthony DeMeo, and Bubba Fairman, but they haven't proven to me yet that they can step up when Bernhardt is not having his greatest of games. And Ryan Wellner is probably going to double him, which is going to get one of those guys open a lot frequently. So they're going to have to bury their shots. On the other side, for Notre Dame offensively, they ran into Ross Blumenthal last week, who the world was introduced to as Drexel's big wall tower, whatever you want to call it, making pretty much every save except for those last two in the fourth quarter. But I think they should rebound offensively against Maryland. Maryland defense with Makar and Nick Grill, they're good, but I think Notre Dame's offense has a slight edge over them with Kavanaugh, with Will York, whatnot. I know that's going to sound crazy to some people, but just frankly, watching the pace of play, it wouldn't shock me if Notre Dame put up anywhere from 12 to 15 goals. And I know that's not typical of Notre Dame, but maybe I'm a little low on the Maryland defense against bigger competition, but I really love this Notre Dame offense. And the two guys at the face-off Gallagher and Charlie Leonard, have the advantage over Shockey, and then whoever Maryland throws out as that second face-off guy that they rotate when it comes to the tournament and whatnot. So I think Notre Dame has the edge there. They're going to win the possession battle, and then the shorties, they're kind of even in the midfield. So I'm really interested to see Notre Dame's offense against the Maryland defense, man.
Absolutely. Notre Dame and Maryland. This one looking like the top game of the weekend with the Irish and Terps facing off. For Maryland, this looking like their toughest game of the seasons thus far. So we'll see how they fare. But this game, Notre Dame and Maryland, featuring two Tewaaraton finalists. And this weekend, all five finalists will be in action as Kavanaugh and Bernhardt go head-to-head. In this one, Caraway will look to get Georgetown to the Final Four. Mike Sowers looking to get to his first Final Four with Duke. And then Chris Gray and UNC, the season's points leader, looking to continue his incredible 2021, which leads me to this question for you, Jordan. Going into this weekend, who's at the top in terms of your Tewaaraton rankings?
Jared Bernhardt still. Until he stopped, I think he might be against Notre Dame, but until he stopped, He is the winner for me. I would probably go Bernhardt, Caraway, Gray, then Sowers. Um, I'm higher on Caraway than most, I believe, but I think when it's all said and done, we're gonna see how great of a player Jake Caraway really is. And people just call him a distance shooter. I love how Quinn on the broadcast said, "Oh yeah, he's a distance shooter." Yeah, yeah, yeah. Then he goes to the rack and dunks it on the goalie in the next quarter. And I think people are really going to see just how much of a gamer Jake Caraway is. But at the same time, until Jared Bernhardt gets stopped, he's the Tour-Tom winner in my mind.
Coming into this season, I liked Jake Caraway as a obviously he is a finalist. I liked him as a front runner for this award. You obviously have him up there at 2. We will see how it unfolds the season. Obviously, though, coming to a close, and with that, another Tour-Tom Award recipient will be named. And again, all 5 will be in action this weekend, and this will be the final weekend that we have all 5 as Maryland and Notre Dame are playing each other. So either Kavanaugh or Bernhardt will be out of this tournament.
Excuse Kavanaugh is not number 5. I had slipped up.
Oh, there we go.
I made a mistake. I made a mistake, buddy. Bernhardt, Caraway, Kavanaugh.
There we go.
Let's just make that clear. I had a major slip up. People feel free to come for me. Don't know why Pat Kavanaugh did not pop into my head. I have his name written down right here, but I'll go take a lap after the show.
Absolutely. Hey, all five of these guys, all 5 of these finalists are going to be in action this weekend. And as I said, this will be the final weekend that we have all 5. So make sure to tune into this weekend's games as Maryland and Notre Dame will be playing Bernhardt or Kavanaugh, obviously the loser. No longer part of this tournament. So make sure you tune in so you don't miss them because obviously they are fantastic players. Jordan, I want to thank you for taking the time today to talk some college lacrosse ahead of this weekend's quarterfinal round. Before I let you go, we're going to make our picks for this weekend here on GLE. You're coming off a 7-1 weekend, that Loyola game, the only one you picked incorrectly. I didn't fare as well, 5-3. So you'll look to stay high. I need to turn it around. Let's start with that first matchup. Virginia, the defending champions, and Georgetown. Who do you got in this one?
I got Georgetown. Virginia coming off that layoff. I do not trust them. I'm going to go Georgetown all the way here, buddy.
I'm going to take Georgetown in this one as well. Again, you said Virginia, a tough one with Bryant coming off that 3-week layoff. They barely escaped from Bryant. A game I had Bryant picked last weekend, kind of on upset alert. But I'm also going to take Georgetown as 1.5 dogs here in this one. I'll also take them to win the game as well. The key, I think, will be the Hoyas, as I said before, dictating the pace in the tempo of the game. If they can do that, play a lot of settled 6-on-6, avoid those transition runs on defense, especially with Jared Connors out there for Virginia. If Georgetown can win some faceoffs, I think they can get it done here. So I have Georgetown in this one as well. Let's move on to the next game on Saturday, UNC and Rutgers. Who do you like?
I'm so tempted to take Rutgers, but until UNC is stopped, I got to go with the Tar Heels, buddy.
I'm going to go Rutgers here. I'm going to, again, go against the ACC. I'm taking Rutgers, partially because I am from New Jersey, despite my selection of Lehigh there last weekend. But this is hands down Rutgers' biggest test of the season. I'm really interested and excited to see what the Kurtz brothers can do in this one as they look to lead this team to the Final Four. But I got Rutgers getting it done here, and then also in part because I'm eager to see how all the Big Ten haters react if Rutgers can get it done here against UNC. So we'll see how that one unfolds. Let's move on over to Sunday as Duke and Loyola will get us started at 12 Eastern. Duke favored by 4.5 goals after beating High Point last weekend, 16-10. Like I said before, a rematch we've seen many times come tournament time. Who are you taking in this one?
I'll take Duke, but it'll be closer than that 4. It'll probably be like 1 or 2 goal game. I think Loyola will really keep it a defensive game, but Duke in the clutch. Duke has just performed well late in games. They've been there, done that. And I trust Duke more than I do Loyola, so that one's pretty easy for me.
I don't think I could have said it better there. Like agreeing with you here. I like Loyola with the points. I think this game stays close, but in the end, I think Duke is too much firepower offensively. The defense is great. I just think this team is too talented to be bowed out of this tournament ahead of the Final Four. The same can probably be said about Virginia and North Carolina. So who knows? But obviously, we'll see how this weekend, how it all plays out with the NCAA tournament quarterfinal round set to get underway, which leads us into our final game of the weekend, Maryland and Notre Dame, looking like the game of the weekend, like I said before, with a spot in the Final Four at stake. Who do you have in this one, Maryland and Notre Dame?
Give me Notre Dame, man. It's hard for me to pick against my home state Terps, but I think this is going to be Notre Dame's offensive awakening here. And this game might be more of a shootout than Kevin Corrigan would like, but I do love Notre Dame's offense right now, and they are getting low-key hot. So watch out. I'm going to put Maryland on upset alert. I don't know if I'm going to put them on fraud alert because that would be very suspicious. It wasn't necessarily their fault that they had to play a Big Ten schedule, but definitely on upset alert, and I'll say borderline fraud alert.
There we go, borderline fraud alert. And there's another tough one here to pick, as we haven't seen Maryland play out of conference this season. Obviously, playing that only the Big Ten only schedule this season. I'm going to agree with you. I like the Irish. I think this defense is the best defense that Maryland will face all season, even if Maryland wins this game. I think Pat Cavanaugh might be one of the most dangerous players they've faced offensively up to this point. So I like Notre Dame to continue rolling onto the Final Four, but an exciting weekend nonetheless, and we could not be more excited for it. Jordan, I appreciate you joining me as always as we look ahead to the quarterfinal round of the 2021 NCAA tournament. Jordan's official picks as well as mine for this weekend's games will be out on Twitter sometime this weekend, along with the rest of our Flash staff, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Jordan, thank you again, my man. Redwoods midfielder Myles Jones will be joining me next. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back. Welcome back to GLE. I hope you're all having a great day and enjoying the show. Make sure to follow Goal Line Extended and Lacrosse Flash across social media and subscribe on YouTube if you are, especially the Lacrosse Flash YouTube channel, as there's an interview with Redwoods head coach Nat St. Laurent up there right now. Make sure to go check that out. And with the summer approaching, we are now a week away from PLL training camp. We're going to end the week by continuing our Flash team previews ahead of the 2021 PLL season. And as I mentioned earlier in the show today, we are talking about the Redwoods Lacrosse Club, who, as I mentioned in the open to today's show, have gone so close the past two seasons. In 2019, losing in overtime in the PLL championship game, and then in 2020, again in overtime, this time in the semifinals, falling short too in both contests. The Whip Snakes, who went on to win both championships. As we all know, and our guest today, he wasn't a part of that 2019 Redwoods team as he came over in a trade in March of 2020, but a part of the 2020 Redwoods squad in Utah, and now looking to get his first full tour scheduled season started with the Redwoods, starting in just 2 weeks when the Redwoods welcomed the Cannons to the PLL in Boston. We're all looking forward to it. I know our guest today, Redwoods midfielder Myles Jones, is also excited. Myles, welcome to the show. What's going on, man?
Man, thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity. This is my first time actually getting on camera talking about the season, so I'm pretty fired up about it.
Absolutely. Let's do it, man. Glad that you could take the time to join us as we here at Flash. We're continuing to take a look at each of the PLO's 8 teams ahead of this summer, looking like it could be possibly the biggest year of pro field lacrosse ever, with all the hype and build up ahead of the season. We're going to have all 44 games live on Peacock, 17 of those also on NBCSN, and then 4 of those games will also be on NBC, and your team will be on the NBC Sports Network 3 times in this regular season, and then one of the 2 regular season NBC games on July 3rd, the weekend of July 4th. So very exciting stuff for you and your team, the league, obviously getting some primetime TV slots in here, and then in just watching how far pro lacrosse has come over your short career up to this point. What excites you most about this season, and then what you're excited or what you're expecting, in seasons to come as the sport and the talent and the coverage and really just everything around the sport continues to evolve and improve?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I'm excited for this season just because this is my first full season with the Redwoods. Obviously, being traded, pretty emotional, and you kind of have that chip on your shoulder, you're ready to play. But, we were only able to play 6-7 games together and in a short amount of time. So there wasn't that time to kind of, play a full game, have a chance to reset, get my body right and digest what, just happened. It was basically just, play a game, 1 day rest, maybe 2 days rest if we were lucky, then straight back onto another game. I didn't really have a chance to kind of get to know my teammates, kind of get to learn how to play with them. And, like anything, you step onto the field with a new team, it's camaraderie, it's, timing, it's figuring out how to play with different guys figuring out how to play with you, figuring out how to move with different guys. So, it's for me, I'm excited for that. And I'm excited, to kind of get over that hump. We lost in overtime. I feel like we didn't win many faceoffs. Coach addressed that in the, in the draft. We got some key pieces in terms of, offensive firepower, Rob Pennell, and, drafting Jamie Trimboli and just having these guys, having Jules come back, just having a good group of guys in that offensive huddle. Getting Matt Landis back and those guys just getting together again. Our team is complete, and I think that this is a really exciting season. And in terms of the sport overall, the PLL continues to do things that are innovative and push the sport. There are a lot of eyes on us last season when we were able to complete a full bubble situation. And, we won, we got a lot of recognition for our efforts there coming off of that. And obviously sports kind of opening up again and, fans being back in the stands. I think that there's a microscope on the sport of lacrosse because we've done such great things last year. And I think people are expecting us to do great things going forward as well.
Absolutely. Once you get it done once, it's kind of like the microscope is on. You got to continue to do it year after year after year. Obviously, as we've seen these other successful leagues like the NFL, MLB, NBA, they've been able to do it year after year. Obviously, hoping and expecting the PLL to continue doing that. But the sport obviously continuing to grow, the leagues and teams and coaches, and especially the athletes pivotal in that growth. And then there's everything else around it in terms of coverage continuing to change as we try to bring lacrosse to the forefront. Myles, that is the goal here, obviously, bringing lacrosse to the forefront. We're going to talk about, you brought up there your Redwoods team. We're going to talk about them in a minute. But obviously talking about in just lacrosse growing, it leads me to the World Lacrosse Sixes. It's a new discipline of the game that was introduced earlier this week, kind of a hybrid between the box and the field game. I'm interested to know your thoughts on what looks like the game that will be representing lacrosse in the LA Olympics in 2028.
Yeah, so I was actually fortunate to get to play in that game. I'm not sure if people saw that post. I was kind of one of the athletes featured in that. And, I saw that a lot of guys had a lot of different, opinions about what Sixes looked like. And from a person who's played in that, I'll tell you one thing, it's a lot of fun.
It looks like so much fun.
Yeah, it's up and down, it's fast paced, and I think the cool part about it is that when you see the way we played versus the way the Canadians played, they obviously played more of that box style lacrosse, and we played more of that dodge and move off the dodge off the pass type of lacrosse. So I think it'd be kind of cool to see the different styles of play when it comes to us versus Canada versus Iroquois, and so on. But it is a different game. You take this long six out, you take the face-off out. So those guys who are used to playing those positions, the LSM, defensemen, the face-off guys, those guys don't necessarily have a role in this. We then get to kind of talking about the more athletic players in the sport, like myself, Connor Busick, these guys who are, big, athletic. You have guys like Will Manny who are slick players, Marcus Holman who are great players. Those guys kind of fit the mold of what would be a successful athlete in this rendition of lacrosse, and it is fun. It's up and down. It's fast paced. It's more or less to me like basketball. So that's why I personally enjoy it. I know a lot of the older traditional lacrosse fans had a lot of opinions to say how they should definitely continue to push the traditional game and in order to get into the Olympics. But man, when you think about being an athlete, when you first pick up, whatever sport it is, and you want to play at the highest level, the Olympics is the highest level.
Absolutely.
If that's the rendition of lacrosse that needs to be in the Olympics for someone to step up and be like, hey, listen, I'm an Olympic athlete and I play the sport of lacrosse, and how big that would be for the sport, regardless if it's not the traditional way the sport is played. I think that that's a big step for our sport as a whole.
Absolutely. Huge step there for the sport, being that we're going to be in the Olympics in 2028. So definitely exciting. You were part of that project. So definitely looking forward to that. All right. Time to talk some Redwoods lacrosse as you and your team get set for training camp next week in Boston ahead of week 1. And this offseason, your head coach, Nat St. Laurent, and his staff, they made a few moves to improve some key areas on this team, as you mentioned before, specifically, though, offensively and at the faceoff position. And let's start with your team's offense. And with Rob Pennell, you brought his name up before, who Coach St. Laurent acquired early this offseason, one of the first names dealt when the trade window opened, and it marks the second straight offseason that Coach St. Laurent has made a big trade following the deal to acquire you last offseason. So bringing in Rob, you kind of have an idea of what his skill set is and what he brings to the table as a quarterback of the offense. So how do you expect your game to be impacted by his decision? And then looking at the entire offense, you add some other pieces, most notably Jules Henningberg is back. So how does Pennell's addition fit into what you guys are planning to do, and how does his addition impact your game?
Yeah, I mean, Rob's a great player. There's no doubt about it. Team USA guy, future Hall of Famer. He's held records when he played at college. I played against him in college, and his name was written in bold letters and all caps when it came to the scouting report. So he's a guy that demands a lot of respect, and I expect him to do great things as the quarterback of our team. And things I kind of played that quarterback role for the majority of the time when I was on the field, but it's tough to play it from the midfield. And I did that when I was at Duke, so I had experience doing that. But I think with Rob playing with on the Redwoods, it makes the offense that much better. I can then focus on playing off ball a little more, which is something I worked on this offseason. It was, not so much me running down the alley and shooting the ball on the run. It was more so me figuring out how to, cut, watching film on how guys have played with Rob in the past and kind of emulate those things in order to be successful. I think that, for me, a lot of the goals that I score are, usually high difficulty, whether that's, lower angles, running through a couple stick checks, being held, having to run through double teams, etc. I think I can get a couple easy ones, maybe cutting to a guy like Rob, or just maybe posting up, outside the 2-point line when they have to respect, his ability to score the ball and slide down to him. I think with Jules coming back, he kind of takes, he kind of gets bumped up to the midfield where Jules can be very dangerous. Jules is a great dodger. He's a great feeder. He can finish, so he can initiate the offense for us. He'll be dangerous because he's been dodging at short sticks, presumably. I'm assuming, teams will put the poll on either me or Perk. And, Perk had a great season last year where he shot the ball very confidently. And you can't forget Ryder or Matt Kavanaugh, two guys who are down to do the dirty work, down to get nasty and get to the middle of the field where they can score goals. And those guys have taken over games, multiple times in their career. And then you add, the veteran leadership of Kyle Harrison and Joe Walters, and you have Ryan Lee, who's a great player. We have a lot of parts. And then we just drafted Jamie Trimboli, who I think is a stud. I've covered a bunch of his games this season on ESPN, and I love his game. He's a guy who you can be dangerous on the wing if we're dodging from the wing, a guy who can invert, a guy who can play off ball very well, a guy who can shoot the rock very well. So Coach really reloaded this offense to be the most dangerous offense in the league, in my opinion. And I'm very excited about that.
Absolutely. Adding offensive talent this offseason was head coach Nat St. Laurent, and we're looking forward to seeing how it all unfolds with that Friday night matchup with the Cannons, the opening game of the 2021 season, being the first chance we will get to see this unit in action. So, again, looking forward to that. And you pretty much mentioned, that we're kind of expecting a 6 offense for your team, looking something like Pennell, Garnsey, Kavanaugh at attack, and then yourself, Perkovic, and Jules Henningberg at midfield. I don't know. Who do you short stick in that situation? Not a question for me. Not a question for you. You're obviously just going to experience whoever the defense. That's their question to figure out. So something that we will watch as well. And then you mentioned there broadcasting a few ACC games there for the ACC network. That had to be a really cool experience. Just speak a little bit on that. Just obviously something that I'm interested in doing, obviously getting into broadcast and stuff. How was those experiences for you?
It's kind of funny because I kind of got the opportunity of doing a podcast with Paul Kertera, who's a good friend of mine. So it was easy for me to be pretty candid with him and kind of talk from the heart. and we just talked about lacrosse. It was pretty cool, and I think a lot of people really loved the interview, and both of us got really good feedback on the interview. And I kind of just started piggybacking with him. I did probably 4 or 5 games my first year. I did 1 game last year, obviously because of COVID, canceling the season. But this year, I was the solo analyst. I wasn't, piggybacking off of, a guy who had a lot of experience. I kind of had to figure it out myself, but I learned a lot from those guys, how to chart, make charts for games for both teams, how to ask questions in the interviews during the week for coaches in order to have your kind of key talking points when it comes to the broadcast, because you're not always talking about what's going on in the field. You're talking about the backstory. You're talking about different things that incorporate into the game, and talking about these players and different key pieces about them, which make the broadcast that much more special. So for me, it was really awesome. I think I had my own little flair on it. I started dressing a little differently, being that I was doing it at home. But I think I've kind of found my groove, especially this season, being able to do consistent games, game each weekend. Doing a new team each week. So it was kind of cool just to kind of stay close to the college game, and closer than I had been in recent years. And I get to see more lacrosse. I get to see my future teammates play. I get to analyze the game. I get to talk to the audience, people who are growing to love lacrosse from a pro player's perspective. And I think people really appreciated that.
Absolutely. And then bringing back my point that I made before, obviously, the league, the teams, the coaches, the athletes playing such a pivotal role here in the growth of lacrosse. There's for you as well, being on the broadcast screen, playing a very pivotal role there for the growth of lacrosse. Let's get back now to the Redwoods. Again, Coach St. Laurent made a few additions offensively, only 2 made to address this defense, though, as Isaiah Davis-Allen was selected in the 3rd round of the entry draft, a short stick defensive midfielder that will compete for a roster spot, and then game roster spots with Pat Harbison, Jack Neer, 2 of the best shorties in the game, and also Nick Ocello. No polls, though, added this offseason, but 1 goalie was brought in former Bayhawks goalie Brian Phipps, who will compete in goal with 2019 Rookie of the Year Tim Troutner, and former Team USA goalie Jack Kelly, who returns after missing the past 2 seasons with a knee injury. So just to keep it short, you have a really interesting situation here in goal with all the talent. But for you as a midfielder and then as a shooter, that's 3 different looks that you'll have here come training camp during that week span. So something I'd imagine that you're excited about.
Yeah, I think we definitely have the best goalie competition that's going to happen in training camp. I played with Brian Phipps in when we played for the Bayhawks, and he was a stud goalie. He was a great guy on and off the field. Obviously we've seen what Timmy Troutner has been able to do. He saved me in a game against the Chaos. He came up with a huge save, which allowed, after a missed pass by me, and it allowed me to make a big play for our team at the end. And Jack Kelly, his resume goes without saying. He had a great career at Brown. He had a great career early on in the MLL. Was a Team USA goalie. So there's gonna be a lot of talent between the pipes, and it's gonna be just elevate the game for our offensive players. We're going to be shooting against 3, all-star goalies, 3 goalies that could potentially be Team USA goalies, and 3 goalies that could potentially be the best goalie in our league. So when you look at that, I think it's going to the competition at all, positions is going to elevate our team. And Isaiah Davis-Allen's another guy I played with, on the Bayhawks. He's a great dude off the field, great dude on the field, loves the game. He just, he's just a good dude. Me and him, go way back and have a great relationship where we used to wrestle after games in the locker room and do fun and have a lot of fun there. So I'm excited to have him there. He's a guy who adds a lot of value to us, especially off the wing and picking up ground balls. Him and Jack Neer are kind of very similar in the way they play defense and the way they their game. So I think they'll both complement each other very well.
Bringing in more short stick defensive middies here. Obviously had one of the best short stick defensive midi tandems and then just units there in 2020. But obviously now adding in IDA as well, a player that you're familiar with, adding Phipps as well, creating more competition there in goal. I mean, it's obviously going to bring 2 goalies, going to keep at least 2, but St. Laurent Free has the opportunity here with the 25-man max to keep all 3 goalies on the roster. So we'll see how that unfolds come training camp. You also have 4 face-off specialists. You did bring that up before. TD Erlin obviously coming in 4th overall college draft selection, looking like he'll be the guy. And then these other 3 guys following. How do you expect this face-off situation kind of unfold?
Yeah, so I feel like we lost a couple games last season that we we lost those games facing off at 36 to 38% on the year. And, you know, it's very tough. It's very, very tough to win games when you don't have the ball, because you rely on your defense to make stops in order for us to get the ball back. So, you know, a guy like TD Erlin coming in, a guy who, you know, is well respected, a guy who is definitely going to make a big, big impact, you know, his first game in. We're excited about that. You know, I think in terms of our, you know, face-off unit and all the face-off specialists we have, I think it's gonna be great competition. You know, TD Erlin's gonna be able to face off against guys who have, you know, pro experience. He's gonna see what it's like to play against those guys. And I think that he's gonna have you know, a great time getting back to, you know, putting his knee down and on techniques that he's used to after having to, you know, change up his game, you know, this past year. But I'm you know, I watched him a bunch. He did very well. So he's a very versatile player. I think that just having him learn from some of the other guys, the learning curve is going to be, you know, great for us and great for him for sure.
Absolutely. I talked to Joe Nardello about a month ago, and he said 2 face-off guys. Max Adler was one of them. 2 face-off guys he does not want to face. TD Erlin, or not that doesn't want to face, but that he's, you know, probably the most scared of going against, obviously being toughest matchup. TD Erlin was that other guy. Obviously, they trained together, but obviously just seeing and knowing already the respect that TD Erlin is kind of demanding here as a college draft pick coming into this league. Myles, I want to thank you so much for taking the time today to join us here on Goal Line Extended. Before I let you go, I have the quarterfinal slate for this weekend laid out in front of me, with your Duke Blue Devils moving on after their win over High Point this past weekend. If you're interested, we can run through this weekend slate and make some game picks.
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. All right, let's start with Virginia and Georgetown. They kick off the weekend on Saturday at 12 Eastern. Who do you got on this one?
Georgetown.
North Carolina, the co-ACC champs, and Rutgers. Rutgers coming off their big win against Lehigh, hoping to continue this success into May. And then UNC, the top seed, one of your bitter rivals. Who do you got in this one?
I got the Tar Heels in that one.
We'll skip Duke, and then we'll come back to it and talk a little bit more about the Blue Devils. But the final game of the weekend is Maryland and Notre Dame. If Duke beats Loyola, they will play the winner of this one, and being that you are on the Redwoods, obviously a ton of Notre Dame alums. So keeping that in mind, who's your pick, the Terps or the Irish?
I'm gonna go with the Irish.
There we go. Obviously keeping that in mind there. Duke and Loyola gets the action started on Sunday afternoon, noon Eastern on ESPNU, a rematch that we've seen a few times come tournament weekend. How does Duke get it done this weekend and move on to Memorial Day weekend and the Final Four?
You know, this is a great rivalry. You know, I think I have played against Loyola 2 out of the 4 years, I believe, that we played in the NCAA tournament. And, you know, this is a great rivalry. We scored an overtime goal when they won a face-off and scored, called timeout. And there's a lot of drama in that game always. I think Duke is just, you know, high-powered. You know, they have a lot of guys who are, you know, a lot of pieces. So you have, you know, a ton of, you know, a talent at attack that's, you know, goes without being, you know, mentioned often. But I think this midfield has stepped up. Their defense has stepped up. Their goalie plays the best goalie play Duke's had since I can remember. So I think just all over the field, they're just a very talented team. If they can just do the things they've done all year, they'll definitely get it done. Win faceoffs. Their faceoff guy is, you know, tearing up this season. He's, you know, scoring goals, picking up 10 plus ground balls, and winning 75% of the faceoffs in big games. You know, he's definitely battle tested. And if you have the ball and you're running, you know, 6 guys out on the field who are potential, you know, All-Americans, if they didn't get it this season, you know, it's very tough to stop. And so Coach Toomey is definitely going to have his hands full with the scouting report, trying to, you know, get each and every one of these guys on it. And, you know, I think Duke's going to come out with that win for sure.
Absolutely. And then if Duke and Notre Dame do win, we'll see that that rematch as well, that ACC rematch in the Final Four. Very exciting. Obviously, you've been in those big games with Notre Dame. You and Sergio Perkovic went at it. Obviously, now fellow midfielders there on the Redwoods. You guys went at it there a few years ago in the Final Four as well. So exciting. We're looking forward to that. Duke and Loyola Saturday at noon Eastern on ESPNU. Make sure you don't miss it. And every game this weekend will be on ESPNU. And again, the winner of this one will play the winner of Maryland and Notre Dame, the second game of the Sunday doubleheader. We'll see if Duke can get it done this weekend and punch their ticket to Final Four weekend. But Myles, I want to thank you so much again for joining us. Best of luck this summer to you and your team. And Austin Owens will be joining me next. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
watching Goal Line Extended, presented by Lacrosse Flash.
Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Ryan Hostbus, and you are watching or listening to Goal Line Extended as we continue our 2021 PLO team previews ahead of training camp and the 2021 PLO season. We kicked off our previews with the Cannons and Archers last week, covered by Austin Owens and Jordan Johnson, respectively. And then we continued on Tuesday's show with my season preview of the Whipsnakes, as I was joined by Flash's Pat Gregoire to break down what this team could look like with the new additions that they have. But you can also check them out in the last 3 episodes of GLE on YouTube or on any podcast platform. And then the Archers preview is accompanied by an interview with 2019 and 2020 Midfielder of the Year Tom Schreiber, and the Whipsnakes show with 2020 PLO Defensive Player of the Year Matt Dunn. So make sure to check those out. And you can also head on over to lacrosseflash.com. The full preview articles are available there as well. And today we continue our season previews. I welcome back Flash Editor-in-Chief Austin Owens to talk some Redwoods lacrosse. Austin, what's going on? Welcome to the show.
Hey, Ryan, how are we doing? It's kind of weird. I just, slipped a bill into somebody's pocket and I'm back. 2 shows in 2 weeks. We're buzzing right now.
Absolutely. Hey, glad to have you back, my friend. We're going to get into your Redwoods preview very shortly, and the accompanying article will be on lacrosseflash.com at some point on Friday or Saturday. But some other news to touch on here before we get to that. Let's first stay with the PLL, as on Wednesday, Atlas social media accounts announced the addition of former UVA All-American and Denver Outlaws player and coach Ken Clausen to their coaching staff, as he will be taking over defensive coordinator duties after Rick Beardsley resigned earlier this offseason. Almost everyone had this called. I actually believed it was Kyle Devitt back in late March that called that on this show, and it looks like a perfect fit, especially given the offseason additions of former Outlaws defensemen Michael Rexroad, Andrew Newbold, and Kyle Plus.
Yeah, you know what? It's not a surprising move, to say the least. I think we touched on this before the entry draft, I believe, when Rick Beardsley stepped down, that it was going to be sort of an interesting thing to see who takes over that defensive unit for Atlas. But yeah, you said it. Kyle Devitt came in and said it. I believe Dan Arestia also said it, so shout out to Dan. Clausen just makes sense. He kind of fits with Rubiar's system. I believe he's got Stephen Brooks as well as an assistant coach. They come in and they just have sort of that youthful group that sort of came up together playing NCAA lacrosse. Brooks at Syracuse, and then you have Rubiar and Clausen, who are both Virginia boys. So, Clausen coached a lot of these guys with the Denver Outlaws last year over the last couple of years. You touched on Kyle Pless. I'm drawing a blank on the other two, unfortunately. Rexroad is the other one I was trying to think of off the top of my head. But it's just a smart fit, and I think he sort of brings the energy you need for this locker room, and I think he'll really fit in. I think Atlas is the perfect guy for the job here with their retool, as we've been calling it.
Absolutely. And then as I was saying that, I said, I forgot. I believe Dan did come on the show to give his college draft big board right ahead of the draft, and we were talking a little bit about the Atlas. So I believe Kyle and Dan both predicting their Ken Clausen on this show. But as you said, a retooled Atlas roster will have a new leader roaming the sidelines, leading this defense, as Clausen is set to join this staff this summer and in week 1 in Boston for training camp. We also have some new information regarding the Nll Free Agency period ahead of the 2021 season, which is set to start the weekend of December 3rd. As yesterday, NLO insider, Flash analyst, and San Diego Seals color commentator Teddy Jenner tweeted out that as of this past Monday, May 17, NLO teams will be allowed to begin re-signing players to contracts. So essentially the ability to extend their own players through new contracts if needed. In Austin, it's been kind of up in the air in terms of how contracts will be dealt with for guys whose contracts expired ahead of what would have been the expected start date for the 2020-2021 season. And then especially for those guys that signed one-year deals for the 2019-2020 season, or even for that originally planned 2021 April start date. So the first step here, it seems, in terms of teams having the ability to send out offers to their own pending free agents before other teams have that same ability. But what else do you know in regards to this re-signing period and when we should expect free agency to open up for the NLL?
I have to add one more title to Teddy Jenner's thing, and that is big team guy.
Absolutely. Huge team guy.
Love Teddy. Thank you for putting that information out, my friend. I don't know a lot at this moment. We're diving into my forte, which is box lacrosse, which is a beautiful thing. And that's how the leaves are going to start turning after the summer's done, and we're going to get back to it. But You know what? As far as I know, I think the NLL it's a situation where you're sort of in flux. You have to figure out, are the players' contracts that they signed in 2020 who didn't get to play, are they going to turn over and have to become free agents again? Or are they going to be able to carry those contracts to 2021? Similar situation just from personal experiences. I worked with the CFL, and they turned that every player that signed in 2020 had to re-sign in 2021. So it could be similar to that. If that is the case, then one team that's in a lot of trouble, as far as I know, is Saskatchewan. The Rush have a lot of very good veterans that were part of their championship core that are going to need to be re-signed. They just turned ownership over to the Priestners, so that'll be very interesting to see how they handle that situation. But it's all rolling along as far as I can think, as far as an off-season sort of timeline. It's going to be, they have to do an expansion draft still because the Panther City Lacrosse Club. Yes.
There we go.
The name's not a big fan of the name, but that's a talk for another day. They still have to pick out the roster. Tracy Koluski and the group over there still have to figure out what they want to do. So I think the free agency period will probably get going in the next maybe month or two, and then the expansion draft should follow soon after. The NLL draft's usually held in September, so it'll be around the same time that the PLL finals happen, I'd imagine, unless they push it back. But it's all coming along. The good thing about this is just we're going to have box lacrosse again, and I think just having news is exciting for me. It doesn't matter when the season starts. It should be in hopefully December like it usually is, but it's just exciting to sort of know that everything's moving along.
Absolutely. Very disappointing that that the league was forced to cancel the 2021 season. Was planned originally for April. But again, the re-signing period for the NLL, the National Lacrosse League, is open. So obviously some very good signs here. So we'll see how many teams jump on this opportunity to re-sign their players. And then sticking with box lacrosse, here's some unfortunate news, though, that we got on Tuesday morning. As a statement from the MSL Major Series Lacrosse in Ontario and the WLA, the Western Lacrosse Association in British Columbia, they both announced in a joint decision by the two leagues to cancel the 2021 season as well as the 2021 Man Cup, which crowns Canada's national senior men's box lacrosse champions. That decision also being made alongside Lacrosse Canada as well as from government and public health authorities. And this is just the next event that has been called off due to COVID-19 in Canada, as just 2 weeks ago, Lacrosse Canada announced the cancellation of 9 other national championships. So the situation for lacrosse in Canada not getting better, as for a second straight summer, the season has been called.
Yeah, it's really tough. And just, I know we put out a tweet from Flash just breaking the news or putting out a breaking graphic, and we got a lot of tweets from players that are in the NLL, just sort of with their arms up. Like, I think Brendan Bonberry tweeted us saying he's on the verge of tears because this is going to be 2 summers. He's not going to be able to play box lacrosse. And it would have been 2 years that he wasn't able to play lacrosse at all, if not for the MLL bubble last year. So a lot of these players, obviously not a lot of them have the opportunity to play in the MLL now, the PLL, which makes it an even smaller area to be able to go and play because there's so few spots available. So some of these guys that you're playing in the NLL are going to be coming into this NLL season with 0 reps. Like, training camp's going to be the first time they go one-on-one with a defender for 2 years, or vice versa, go in one-on-one with an offensive player. So, I mean, I've spoken to one person behind the scenes that last year when the NLL said the bubble was going, said straight up, I don't know if I'm going to even be able to play. I might retire because I don't have any reps. I've been sitting just working out, hoping for something to happen over the last year. So there's going to be some guys in that situation where it's going to be a little sloppy, I think, the NLL play, relating back to our last conversation, because guys just, you can only go and play wall ball. That only does so much for you. You have to be able to go out and, shoot the ball, pass the ball, get your reps in,
get live game situation type reps.
There's nothing that simulates live game action, especially in a sport like lacrosse. So running off the bench and getting cross-checked in the arm or something for the first time, that's going to be a interesting little sensation. I think guys are going to have some flashbacks. So, it's tough. The Man Cup is arguably the hardest trophy to win in the sport, along with the Minto Cup, which is probably a little bit tougher, I'd say. Just the grind throughout the summer that these guys go through. And it's not like the NLL where these guys have maybe a week to recover. It's like you play a game on a Saturday and you might be playing another game on a Wednesday or Tuesday. Like, it's 18 to 20 games and you're grinding the entire summer, and then you play every team in a 7-game series or a 5-game series. So it's tough. It's really tough. And we don't know the status of the Minto yet. That's still sort of up in the air, but I feel for the players the most. We all really feel for the players because they have to sit at home and not do something that they really love. I mean, it's not the NLL. It doesn't have the platform that the NLL does, but guys really enjoy it. It's kind of like college. It's going back to college lacrosse. It's sort of like bragging rights in the summer. On top of those extra reps, you play guys like a Lyle Thompson could play guys from the Georgia Swarm on other teams, and you sort of get to chirp each other and play against your teammates. So it's sort of fun for these guys during the offseason to do stuff like that. So it's going to be missed. In my opinion, it's probably the right decision because I'm assuming most of their revenue has to come from people coming to the games and gate revenue. So it is what it is. It's going to be really shitty to not see a Man Cup. Excuse my language, but it's for the best, I think. And I think in 2022, you'll see a lot of guys sort of come out and be really excited to play again. And that'll be some of the best lacrosse we've seen in the MSL and the WLA for a number of years now.
We are hoping that lacrosse will return to Canada in 2022 or hopefully late 2021. Lacrosse Canada did clarify that this decision isn't a cancellation of the lacrosse season in Canada, but instead a current health safety guideline with hopes that a return to play stages across the country will improve to the stage where competition could restart. So something that we will hope for as we approach the summer. And then some more news that we got on Tuesday in the world of lacrosse, as World Lacrosse unveiled their new discipline of the game called World Lacrosse Sixes, or Sixes for short, essentially a field lacrosse version of box lacrosse, or vice versa, however you want to call it, with a few changes, including the 8-minute quarters, 30-second shot clock, and practically the elimination of the face-off as it will only be used at the start of each quarter. So some people obviously embracing it here early on. Some people hate it. Others in between. I personally don't hate it, but I do feel I share the same, like a similar view that most people hold, that yes, it should help grow the game, especially in countries where the sport is being introduced slowly, and particularly those that have kind of a strong appeal for basketball and hockey. And yes, it gets the sport into the Olympics, but this isn't box lacrosse. This isn't field lacrosse. It's a completely different form of the men's game and the women's game. So from my perspective, for the casual fan, kind of thinking about them, that already has to deal with the men's and women's game being different. They already have to deal with the pro outdoor and pro indoor games being different. They also have to deal with the men's college and pro game having pretty noticeable difference too, being the college and high school game being different from the PLO, which is a completely different topic for another day. But in my opinion, this just creates confusion in terms of what actually is lacrosse for those new and prospective fans, although obviously it looks like a lot of fun to play. I'm not exactly buying into it, though. I'm interested to hear what you have to say, though, before we talk about the Redwoods.
I mean, I'm Canadian, so I just say just play box lacrosse, but that's not what everyone's thinking here. It's tough. I mean, we were talking about this before we went live here, and it's just sort of like, you said it yourself. You said it right there. As a casual fan, there are so many variations: men's, women's, field, box. It's tough. The PLL from the MLL, they're all different. So different. Like there's so many different things that, as a casual fan, it's tough. It is tough to sort of get behind lacrosse when you don't really know the difference between field and box, which one I should watch, which one I shouldn't. It's tough to keep all that in mind. And the NCAA game is even different from field and box in terms of rules and whatnot. But at the same time, if it gets it into the Olympics, I'm down. I'm down for it. And also, the best thing about it was we tweeted about this yesterday as well. The engagement of people just coming up with their fantasy 6v6 lines for the U.S., Canada, the Iroquois is fantastic. Like there are some unbelievable 6-on-6 lines. Like for the Iroquois, I think it was the Stotts brothers, Lyle Thompson, Warren Hill, Randy Stotts. I don't know if I have 6 there. I'm not a math guy, Ryan, so let me know if I missed there. But throw a
goalie in there. Put Dylan Ward there in cage.
So no, this would be the Iroquois. So Warren Hill would be the goalie because he was their Yeah, he was their attendee for the 2018 World Champs. But
be on Team Canada. My apologies there.
No, that's all good, man. It's been a while since we've gotten to see some World Lacrosse now. What is it going on? 4 years almost. 3 years, excuse me. Again, not a math guy. The one thing is this is one thing is World Lacrosse really got themselves in a lot of trouble last year with the whole Iroquois situation and the World Games situation, and they're still trying to work their way back from that. So I think they've learned their lesson, but at the same time, the IOC might think of this differently, but I'm not going to be watching this regardless if the Iroquois don't play at the Olympic Games. I think
Absolutely.
most people are on that same wavelength. If they're not there, what's the point?
And if you think about it really too, like lacrosse, geographically, where it's the United States, it's Canada, and it's the Iroquois national team. Those are the top three, world lacrosse teams, in the world. So not having them would be a huge disappointment. For the Olympics there in 2028. But World Lacrosse Sixes most likely to be the representation of lacrosse at the 2028 Olympic Games. Can't argue how cool lacrosse in the Olympics sounds, as you said, but wishing that it was, one of our versions that we do have, that we are accustomed to. But we can't always get what we wish. Expect to be seeing and hearing a lot about Sixes, though, in the build-up to those 2028 games. But let's get right into now your Redwoods lacrosse season preview. Let's start with the offense for this team because head coach Nat St. Laurent made some moves this offseason to add some pieces around what he already had. He brought in Rob Pennell via trade to be his quarterback from X. Ryan Lee was Coach St. Laurent's first pick in the entry draft, and then the additions of college draft selections Charlie Bertrand and Jamie Trimboli towards the end of the college draft in the midfield, along with welcoming back Jules Henningberg, who missed the championship series. So some new faces here on this Redwoods offense, and we kind of expect this attack to look something like Pennell, Garnsey, and Kavanaugh, with the midfield led by Perk, Joe Walters, Kyles Harrison, today's guest Myles Jones, and then these other offseason additions, all of whom we expect to make the team, which brings up the question of how Coach St. Laurent plans to use Henningberg and Ryan Lee. What roles do you expect them to play this summer on this offense?
Jules is very interesting to me because he's so athletic and he is so skilled that I think you can get away with running because of Rob Pennell and how skilled he is. You can get away with running a really good veteran in Matt Kavanaugh, and you can get away with running a very good player that's still a couple of years into his career in Ryder Garnsey, who's still trying to prove himself. So I think you run Jules out of the box, and I think we've talked about this off the show. It's just, could you imagine a starting midfield line of Myles Jones, Sergio Perkovic, and Jules Henningberg? That's bananas.
It's tough to think about. It's
oh my God.
Matching up defensively against that group. It's
yeah. Oh my goodness!
Working on the Whipsnakes preview, I was thinking, how do you match up against a Matt Rambo, a Zed Williams? In that situation, you would put a shorty, I guess, on Jay Carlson on the crease. Yeah. But then you look at the rest of this midfield. You got possibly John Haas. You got Connor Kirst possibly rotating in, and with Shannon Chuck and I'm missing someone here, Smith.
Yeah,
like who do you put the shorties on in that situation? The same applying here to the Redwoods.
Exactly. Who do you put a shorty on? Do you risk it with Myles Jones or do you risk it with Sergio Perkovic? I'd say no, because those guys are massive bodies that are going to run your ass over. Myles Jones showed that very well. That truck stick of Curtis Dixon I was watching back earlier today. It's just hilarious to me, honestly. Sorry, Curtis, I love you.
Poor Curtis Dixon.
Yeah, sorry, I'm bashing one of my countrymen, but that was one of the marquee moments of the tournament. That was incredible. So I don't know. Maybe you put a shorty on Jules Henningberg. It's death by 1,000 cuts. Honestly, it's who do you leave open? It's the same thing we were talking about with the Cannons preview. You have Rob Pennell behind. You have to put a shorty on somebody. Who do you do it to? Ryan Lee is another guy that I know you touched on in your first question. He's going to be very interesting. I don't know what kind of a role he's going to play. He's going to play. I would assume that he's going to play a role similar to how Nat St. Laurent used Clark Peterson, where he's just sort of he subs in and out. But then again, Clark Peterson wasn't the reigning MLL Offensive Player of the Year. Like, Ryan Lee had 20 goals last year, and a lot of them were from just playing the two-man game behind the net. He slipped off of his man and then drove the crease and was fed and then scored. And he's a box guy. He's a Canadian, so he's money on the crease. So if you need a guy to finish in close, the variation of this offense is ridiculous because you have so many good finishers. Garnsey's a killer. Kavanaugh is a veteran who's a killer. He's been a proven killer for years. And Ryan Lee's coming off the best field season of his career so far, and he's still young. So I think Nat St. Laurent, you look at this team, and I think they've sort of been one of those teams that's sort of been, I don't know the word for it. I guess their MO has been defense. They have all these short stick defensive midfielders, and then they have one of the best decors in the league. But now they've built that decor's remained, but now you have one of the best offensive units in the league, led by a guy that's a number one quarterback. So this team is scary up front, and they have a lot of different ways they can hurt you. And I think that's the most interesting thing to me. Like, I'm not going to be surprised at all if the Redwoods not run the table, but if they're one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the league, I would not be surprised at all.
Henningberg returns after missing the 2021 championship series in Utah due to health reasons, but we should see him back on the field healthy this season, most likely running out of the box as a midfielder. And then you brought up the short stick defensive midfield on this team, which brings us down the roster into those SSDM position players. And Coach St. Laurent has a lot of them, 4 rostered, and you have all 4 making this Redwoods final roster out of training camp. Jack Neer and Pal Harbison, they're arguably 2 of the best in the game. Isaiah Davis-Allen, he fell to round 3 in the entry draft, and he was St. Laurent's second of only 2 selections. And then post-game podcast host Nick Acello, you have him rounding out this position group, arguably the best former college football player in the league. This is a great unit. How do you see them faring this season? Obviously, bulking up on depth and talent with all the offensive talent coming into the league this year.
Well, let me just put this out there that Ocello was the first guy I wrote down because I wasn't feeling like getting sewered on Twitter for an entire day.
There we go.
I got my guy Nick. When I looked at the short stick defensive mids, it's exactly what you said. Harbison and Neer have been 2 of the most trusted guys on the roster, as is Ocello. They play nearly every game that I've seen, and they all play a big role. But then you also draft a guy like IDA, and he's such a good such a good short stick defensive midfielder that you just can't leave him off the roster. So the way we did this is we had the 25-man roster. So I'm not saying they dress all 4 of these guys every game, but you have to have at least all 4 on the roster because of injury. You never know what happens, depth issues. Like, I think Jack Neer could also play a role up front if he really needed to. If you need him in a squeeze on offense, he could sub in and play there. But his bread and butter is on the defensive end. Same with Pat Harbison. Same with everyone we've talked about here in this section. So I don't think all of them play. I think maybe you take Nick out for a game and maybe you take Neer out for a game and you sub IDA in there because I think he's too dynamic to just have him on the 25 and have him sitting at home all season. But it's going to be one of those things where you just sort of play it by week and see who's matching up against who and then go from there, I think. But this unit's very good. And again, they've just managed to maintain all of their key pieces, which is huge for Nat.
Absolutely. And the Redwoods kind of looking there at that defense. You mentioned that as well before, keeping all of those defensive pieces as well. The Redwoods were the only team in the league this offseason to not add a pull ahead of training camp. They'll go in with almost the same defense as last year with Garrett Epple, Eddie Glazner, and Finn Sullivan at close defense. John Sexton is at LSM with Hugh Krantz, Larkin Kemp, the current fighter there of the NCAA, and Chris Price also traveling to compete for a spot at camp. And then Matt Landis, still some question marks around his availability with his military obligations, so something that we will continue to follow. Again, going with a very similar defensive unit. Who do you think comes out of camp on this team, and how do you see this starting defensive unit looking like?
It's a lot of what ifs, I think, with a couple of guys. You talked about Landis and you talked about Kemp. And I have Landis on the roster and I have Kemp off the roster. On top of championing the resistance right now against the NCAA, Larkin Kemp, as far as I can tell, has a pretty...
We are bringing down the NCAA.
Yeah, one brick at a time. Keep up the good fight. He's got a pretty big job. I think I saw on his LinkedIn that he's a global strategy manager with the WWE. So I don't think that's a job he can just step away from. I'd be happy if I'm wrong because I know he had a really good 2019 year. But I have him off the roster because of those reasons. It's sort of like how Brian Karolounis, I didn't know if he could travel. So I think it might be similar to that where we could see him, but we probably won't see him all season. Sorry, not all season, but for parts of the season. He might have to step away to do his job, which isn't such a bad thing. Landis, the same thing, military obligations. I think if he's tied up this year, I'd say Chris Price makes the team, but if you have Landis in the team along with Epple, Sullivan, and Glazner, you got to keep him on there. That's arguably the best D unit in the league with Landis in it. So you know what? They maintained everybody. It's the same running thing, is that this team was able to keep all of their core pieces and not lose a lot of guys, which was good. They lost the odd piece, obviously, in expansion and for the player pool. But you know what? The Epple, Glazner, and Sullivan are amazing. I really like that unit. Epple obviously missed a little bit of time last year because of the suspension due to the thing with Matt Gaudette. It is what it is. I think John Sexton's one of the most underrated polls in the league. I think he sort of snuck under the radar because of all the good talent on this team, and I think Hugh Krantz is a really good depth piece to sort of sub in when Sexton needs a bit of a breather, or you just want to change up the package a little bit. But those UND guys, I mean, Notre Dame's unbelievable. What more can you say about them? They are fantastic, all of them, and I think if Landis is back in this unit, they're going to dominate again on defense. So I'm excited to see what they can do, and if Kemp and or Landis are in this group, then they're going to be laughing this season.
Absolutely. I think if I can recall correctly, Hugh Krantz went to the PLO Championship Series in Utah. I don't believe that Kemp went. So they're maybe putting that, taking that into account there. You have Krantz on this final 25-man roster. Kemp, again, championing here for us against the NCAA. He might not even have time there to play any time in the PLO with all his obligations there to fighting the good fight. So we'll see how this defensive unit comes out of training camp. St. Laurent also added former Maryland and Bayhawks goalie Brian Phipps following the entry draft to compete at camp with starting goalie Timmy Trauner and Jack Kelly, who returns after missing the past 2 seasons due to a knee injury, one of the best goalies in the game there during his prime. But how do you expect this goalie situation to play out, given Kelly's history and Phipps' status as a former starter in the MLO?
It's going to be very interesting to me because obviously you talked to Nat earlier this week, and I'm pretty sure when this airs, it'll already have dropped. So get on me if it's not. But I have Brian Phipps in there because he's a veteran. He's a guy that Nat coached with the Ohio Machine, I believe, for 1 season, maybe 2. He's just a proven veteran. He's been a starter in the MLL for as long as I can remember watching the league. He's a name that's synonymous with the MLL. And you put him as a backup. He's not even supposed to be your starter. So you put him in behind a guy like Tim Troutner, who he's had the odd off game, but he's been very good for the Redwoods throughout his 2 years. So it'll be interesting. I think it makes me a little more skeptical now that Nat said the other day that Kelly's clear. He's good to come back. And obviously that changes a lot of things because obviously he was the backup behind John Galloway at the 2018 World Championship. So now that I know that, I locked my roster in before we had talked to Nat. So it'll be fun to watch that goalie battle. And I think it's more of a wait and see thing and see who comes out because, you know, Fipper's a really good player and he's been around forever, but it's a result-driven league. I mean, if he doesn't show up in camp, then Kelly's going to be the guy behind Troutner.
You mentioned it there. We do have an interview with head coach Nat St. Laurent of the Redwoods lined up. That should already be out with this show coming out on Friday. I believe we have that interview set for Thursday on the Lacrosse Flash YouTube, so go check that out if you have not. But then if you think back to 2019 and you're saying obviously Kelly being the backup or Phipps obviously being the backup to Trauner, I wouldn't be too surprised if Kelly makes this team, maybe he's the starter. I wouldn't even be surprised if Phipps makes this roster and is the starter. And then even thinking about the goalie situation, all 3 of these guys could make it, obviously with flexibility, with a whole full 25-man roster. You could theoretically bring 3 goalies. Obviously, the Redwoods, we're going to get to their face-off situation next, but they do currently have 4 face-off men. So obviously taking that into account. But back in 2019, going into that season, I remember listening to a few of the videos that the PLO was putting out in training camp, and St. Laurent was saying, between Tim Troutner and Gunnar Walt, who was the other goalie on this Redwoods team, it was kind of go game by game, figure out how we want to operate with the goalie position going forward. Obviously, Trauner ended up taking the job as the starter, and he ran with it. But, question marks. Trauner, that job is not his, especially after talking to St. Laurent the other day. That job definitely is not anybody's right now. Obviously, someone will take it there, hopefully out of training camp, or maybe we see something like the Archers have done the past season and a half with their 2 goalie tandem. But again, you have Tim Trauner and Phipps staying in Boston to be in goal for week 1 as a part of the Redwoods 25-man roster, which leads us to probably the biggest question mark on this team, which is the face-off position, as St. Laurent will go to camp with, as I said before, 4 draw guys after selecting 2 in this year's college draft. T.D. Erlin, who dominated college lacrosse as the best face-off specialist in the game over the past few seasons and the number 4 overall pick in this year's college draft. He should have his spot secured, but the questions begin with who St. Laurent decides to go with him to pair. Peyton Smith, who was his college draft selection in last year's draft. And then Craig Baskuljian, they both struggled in 2020. Charlie Leonard, a 4th-round draft pick this season. He comes in after a great season with Notre Dame. You have Leonard making this roster over the other two. What do you think gives him the edge, and how dominant is TD this summer in his first season?
I mean, I think it comes down to what you were talking about with Joe Nardella during one of the first episodes of GLE. Is you asked him who he sort of does not want to go up against. He said Max Adler, and he said TD Ierlan, who's not even in the league yet.
Both of those
And
guys,
that's how
not even PLL yet, and he's both of these
that
guys.
scary.
These are the two.
That's how scary the kid is. Given they train together, so he's going to say some good things about his boy, but he knows from going up against him how dangerous TD can be at the stripe. So he's an obvious one. I think he's going to be a top 3 face-off guy. He's coming in with similar hype, maybe not as much of a hype train as when Trevor Baptiste joined the MLL, but he's the all-time NCAA face-off king. Like, he's the guy. So I look at it, and he's going to be the guy. There's no question about that. Then you talk about Peyton Smith, you talk about Greg Paskuljian, and then you talk about Charlie Leonard. And Charlie Leonard, to me, he was the last pick in the PLL college draft, but he's also a guy that's worked in a tandem this year with Notre Dame, and they're top 10 in the nation in face-offs. So he's a guy that
Kyle Gallagher was also a selection in this college draft. Before this season, Kyle Gallagher had his struggles this season, obviously with the new face-off rules, but Kyle Gallagher was one of the best face-off guys at Penn the last few seasons. Sorry to cut you off there.
No, you're all good, man. And if both of your face-off guys get drafted into the pros in the same draft, you're doing something right. So I think the role that sits him in behind TD, where he doesn't have to take a lot of draws, but if TD takes, say, a face-off violation and he has to sit out the next draw, I think Charlie Leonard's the perfect guy to come in. And it's no disrespect to Peyton Smith and Greg Paskuljian, but the numbers speak for themselves, unfortunately. And, you know, it wasn't great last year. Not to say that they wouldn't do the best they can in a role similar to Leonard, but, you know, I think if you have a chance to bring in the young guy, and Peyton Smith I know is young too, but Leonard is a little bit younger than him, then you can sit him in behind just from learning and battling against TD every practice and on a week-to-week basis. Like, imagine how much better he'll get just as a result of that. So I think it's not only that you're bringing in Charlie Leonard because he's the youngest guy, it's that he can be a sponge and learn. Being a sponge sounds so silly because they're the same age, he and Ierlan, but he can come in and learn from the best and take that and say, I'm even looking towards maybe if there's more expansion, then Leonard gets his chance with another team. You've sat behind TD Ierlan for a year and learned all you can about taking draws and become better. So it's not only a thing for now, it's a thing for the future with the Redwoods that, hey, you have that flexibility. So I don't know. I'll see what happens, because it's going to be whoever has the hot hand behind TD that makes the team, but you're not going to go out and draft a guy like Leonard with one of your picks that are so valuable nowadays if you're not going to give him a really good look in camp. So I have Leonard on there now, but if anybody else makes this team, I won't be too surprised, because they're not going to be taking a ton of draws unless TD ends up making a lot of mistakes and jumping early at the dot.
Absolutely. I wouldn't imagine we're thinking about backup face-off specialists, except for those teams that really have like a tandem in a way. We're expecting for the 19-man rosters that one face-off guy is on these game rosters. So then obviously expecting to see TD. We're all very excited to see what he brings to the table here in 2021. And then in seasons to come, after watching him on the college lacrosse field, after he dominated there at Albany, Yale, and Denver over the past 5 springs, and then how the rest of this unit looks, something that we will be watching for as training camp unfolds. And then even kind of saying, you know, we said before, possibly 3 goalies rostered. We could see 3 face-off guys rostered. That is not out of the question. Austin, I appreciate you joining me as we take a look at the Redwoods Lacrosse Club ahead of training camp in the 2021 season. And then Ken Clausen has been brought on by Coach Rubier and co. The NLL opens its re-sign period, and then we have another new form of lacrosse. With World Lacrosse Sixes, we gave our input on it. Let us know what you think about the plan for lacrosse to be in the Olympics in 2028. But that is going to do it for today's show here of Goal Line Extended. I want to thank you all for watching and or listening. If you are not already, make sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube as well as on whatever podcast platform that you use. You can also head on over to lacrosseflash.com. All of our podcasts are there as well as my Whipsnake season preview. Austin's Redwoods preview is either there or will be there very soon, so make sure to check that out and keep your eyes out for our other team previews that we will be rolling out in the next few weeks. You can also follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at GL Extended. All the links that you will need will be in the description of the video or podcast that you are viewing or listening to right now. And we will be back on Tuesday to look back at quarterfinal weekend. We'll have another team and guest as we continue our PLL team previews, and then whatever other news that we get in the world of lacrosse. Tune in Tuesday so that you do not miss it. I hope you all have an incredible weekend, and we will see you on Tuesday.
Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at GL Extended and subscribe to the show on any of your favorite podcast outlets. You can find Lacrosse Flash on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and online at lacrosseflash.com.